You don't need art school anymore. There was a day and age where it was not only the most logical option for an art career, but perhaps even the best avenue toward one. Those days are gone. Welcome to the present. Greetings, my name is Zach. I'm an artist and I also taught middle and high school art for 11 years. And yes, I did go to art school. I went to a state university and came out with a degree in graphic design and another in art education. In the last episode, I went through a slew of reasons why you ought to go to art school. In this one, we will be going over the opposite, why you shouldn't go to art school. This may seem a little like I'm playing devil's advocate or even just simply rambling, but the sheer complexity of the issue benefits being explored from both angles. My personal perspective here is obviously based on what I experienced at art school, but also on students that I had that then went on to do it themselves, professionals I know or have as friends, much online research, and just the perspective of being out of school for 14 years. With all that being said, if you are enjoying these videos and podcasts, please consider liking and subscribing. Let's jump in. Now let's start with who this might be for. I'm assuming if you're listening to this, you are the kind of person who might have considered or are considering art school. Maybe this is to hone your skills for personal progress, but more than likely it is a potential path toward employment at some point. My general focus moving forward then is why art school may not be the best path for you personally to get to those ends. Let's start with some really exciting and lovely aspects of what our digital age has brought us. An incredible breadth of purchasable online content. An incredibly large component of what we might pay for with art school is the instruction necessary to hone and improve our skills. As fledgling artists, we often don't know what we don't know, and we benefit massively from those more experienced than us showing us the way. This is still true, but the reality is with everything built in the last decade or so online, there are so many potential options for high-quality art education. The sheer quantity of the material now available can be a little bit daunting, but hold on to that thought for just a second. Hold on to that and think about it. The quality and quantity of online available content is daunting. And that's in massive opposition to what it used to be. It used to be that if you wanted to learn how to make art, you either found somebody who did it and apprenticed under them in some capacity, or you went to an art school. And there were usually not that many available in your local area, so that might mean that you have to travel or you have to go abroad to do so. So we're in this wonderful position where we have a glut of options. That does mean sometimes it's difficult to sort through them and figure out exactly what you need or what's best for you. But if you go on to Gumroad or YouTube or any of the various Patreons or CubeBrush, you are going to find an immense quantity of online instructional material. So, being that that's a little bit daunting, there are a couple that I would like to bring to your attention. If this is you and you're struggling with the idea of I want to go to art school because I want all this knowledge and I want to know how to do these things, but I'm overwhelmed by perhaps some of the things that are going to come later on in this podcast. So let's go over a couple that I think deserve your attention. Marc Brunet has a digital art school that he offers on his website, CubeBrush. You may have also seen him here on this platform. He's quite prolific and he's been in the industry for a long time. I was actually aware of his work ages ago under his alias Blueflay because he had work on DeviantArt way back in the day that we used to ooh and awe at because it was just so wonderful. He started in the industry quite young. He spent a lot of time at Blizzard. And he built an art program that is available for purchase that has, I think, 8 semesters, maybe 9 semesters worth of content available in it. Now, this content isn't super expensive. I believe it's somewhere between $360 to $500 US if that's what your, if it's not running any kind of deals at that moment. That sounds like a lot of money, but considering what we're going to explore later as far as how expensive some art schools are, it's really just a drop in the bucket. Now, his courses are very specifically tailored towards digital artists and getting into the game or film industries. So it's a lot of concept art focused things. But I have purchased his course and I've spent some time in it, and everything that I've gone through so far has been really well laid out It's given me really good information, and his customer support has also been really good in the past for myself, but also for a lot of other customers that I've been able to look at. So he offers a program that isn't super expensive and is kind of a nice intro for somebody who doesn't have a lot of art background on getting into things. So he's one to explore, and his website, CubeBrush, has lots and lots of other things available as well. Another is Steven Zapata. Now, Steven Zapata is also prolific on here. He became a little bit more widely known for some of his AI art related content about 6, 7, 8 months ago on this platform. But even prior to that, I was aware of his presence, particularly because his skills are phenomenal. He went to I'm going to have to look this up, but he went to one of the really prolific art schools out in California, if I'm not mistaken. And he went to school with a couple other people that you might know. I would encourage you, go check out his content if you get a chance. But he offers some classes on rendering, on pencil drawing, and in the past year or two, he's actually released an entire set of courses. They're a little bit more expensive. I don't know how much off the top of my head, but the quality of his education is really top-notch. And the way that he talks through things with his eloquence and his ability to explain the meditative and necessary components of art in general make him somebody that I would highly recommend for any amount of his content that you want to get into. Trent Kanuiga is another that exists on this platform and also has a lot of courses on Gumroad. Again, this is an example of someone whose courses I've actually purchased in the past. They don't break the bank. I think the one set that I purchased was somewhere between $20 and $60. And it was just 10 to 20 little lessons on getting started with art. I purchased them partially because it was good for me to start getting back into things a couple years ago. But also, as a teacher, it's just nice to see how other people teach and how they break down things. But his content was really solid, and it was all with a pencil in that first set of courses. Now, he has dozens and dozens of courses, and this kind of elaborates the point that I was making earlier, is we have an inexhaustible quantity of art education that's purchasable, and most of it doesn't break the bank. So there's lots of things that you can explore. You could buy a course from one of these people that I've mentioned already, or from the dozens to hundreds of other people that I haven't mentioned that you could go read reviews on and find their content. All of this is to say that most of what you would be looking to get from an art school in terms of actual art education is now available online for a fraction of the price that it is when you go to a university or an art school. All of these people that I've mentioned, in conjunction with another one I'd like to throw out there, Proco, which is actually an amalgamation of many different artists and their work and their instructional materials put together by Stan Prokopenko. That's another amazing resource, and the great part there is you can kind of assume anything that's on the Proco website is going to be of good quality. I've purchased courses from there as well, and again, everything has been fantastic. Stan just seems to have a tendency to not put anything on there that's not worth its salt. So all of this is to illustrate that the main goal for many people, the art education, how to paint, how to draw, how to make characters believable, all of those things, those are now not available only in art schools. Those are available online. And as we're going to see in a minute, some of them are available in different capacities than you would be getting them if you went to an art school. So some of these examples might seem expensive when you begin to check them out for yourself, but we're going to discuss a little bit later on how inexpensive they are in comparison to art school and what art school actually looks like. Now, the next thing I want to jump into is the breadth of free online content. That's right, folks. Everything we just went over, there are free versions of it. Now, is it as good as the stuff that you will pay for? Probably not. In just that it's probably not that easily accessible. I do think you probably could spend enough dedicated time on YouTube alone and find enough art educationally related content to construct yourself a 4-year degree. I have little to no doubt. The sheer quantity of free online content is remarkable. It can also be overwhelming, and probably even more overwhelming. Part of the thing that you pay for when you pay for content is you're paying for expertise. Somebody who's going to take the time to put something together, who's going to be vouched for by other people. You're kind of assuming they know what they're talking about. Whereas anyone can upload a video on how to draw a thing, and it might be awesome and it might be terrible. But again, because it's free, you can find 24 people who talk about how to draw the human face, how to create portraiture, how to make mountains not look like stupid little puddles. All of these things you can explore. You can look at their art and make sure that their art is actually what you're trying to aim for. And then maybe their way of explaining things isn't going to be great for you, but there's going to be 200 other people who are going to go through those same things. So the sheer breadth of free online content also makes art school a little harder to justify if the main justification is that you're going to get art instruction. You're going to learn how to make beautiful things. So we're really fortunate that we exist in a world with all of this online content. It was not this way when I was younger. When I was in school, in high school more specifically, most of this didn't exist. I couldn't so easily Google how to do a thing, and YouTube, if it existed when I was in high school, it was so unprominent that it was not in any of our minds. We didn't know that those kinds of things existed or that they would be coming down the pipeline at some point. So the access to these things now makes the path that I took, if I was going to try to do that again, I don't know that I would. I don't know that I would go down that same path. So we're really fortunate that this is the world that we live in now. One of the biggest reasons raised for going to college of any kind is the community that you develop at college. And this is a hard point to dispute because community is invaluable for us as human beings in general, and it also helps us to gain skills and have connections moving forward, things that I mentioned in the last video. Now, we are starting to see the rise of large-scale creative communities and small-scale intimate creative communities on the internet today. So, though perhaps not as traditionally beneficial as schools, the online communities are continuing to grow. Many of the artists you may follow here on YouTube, or some of the ones that I've already mentioned, have Discord communities. And some of which, like the Digital Painting School by Hardy Fowler, have weekly or even daily studies and study sessions to participate in. So if you truly desire to have the online community, some moderate searching can yield tremendous results. This is a wonderful thing and something that I have kind of internally debated about for years. One of the biggest benefits of going to art school was the friends you make, being able to interact with instructors in person, being able to see how people work through things. You can get some of that on YouTube by watching time lapses or things like you're watching in the background if you're actually watching this video right now and not listening to it. You get to see how I work or how anyone else works. But I have discovered in the past year or two that this is really starting to come into its own online. And what a wonderful thing. What an awesome thing to be able to jump into a Discord community that is specifically set aside just for people like you who are trying to hone their craft, who are working on artistic endeavors, being able to share things with them anonymously, being able to get their feedback or even just their encouragement, being able to see what they're working on and how they're working on it. And you get some of that weird accountability and linearity that you would get from school. One of the studies in the Digital Painting School in the last couple weeks has been rocks. Well, rocks aren't very glamorous. They're not very fun to work on, but we all need to work on drawing things like rocks because the strategies for making a rock look like a rock is not dissimilar from the strategy of making a cloud look like a cloud or a deciduous tree look like a deciduous tree. These skills transfer, but getting assignments, quote unquote, like that, working through them, watching other people work through them, these are beneficial things, and I'm so happy to report that the online communities are growing in this capacity. You know, I think people in the past sometimes thought things like Instagram would do this, that like I could share my in-progress work, but it doesn't really work that way. It's a platform for other things. It's a platform for showing off largely. But these Discord communities are starting to grow in this capacity. Sometimes when you purchase classes, you can get these kind of things as well. I've purchased classes and taken classes with Marshall Vandriff in the past. And usually there's community aspects there, whether it's on YouTube in general or it's just the live version of the class. Which is something I forgot to mention earlier, but a lot of these classes can actually have live components sometimes where you actually are interacting with other human beings. So now you're getting more of those community benefits than you would be getting from just a standard class. and you're still, paying a fraction of what you would for art school, and it's much more tailored to what you specifically are working on. And continuing on that point of what you are working on, one of the wonderful parts about pursuing your art education, not through an art school of some kind, but just how you personally assemble those components, is the focus. You are able to focus on exactly what you want and need. Now, the caveat to this is that an art school is going to give you things that you don't think you want or need, but you do, and that's true. But you also, as an adult, will start to uncover those things for yourself. So the ability for you to be able to choose what to pursue and how to pursue it and how fast to pursue it is a really tremendous benefit of pursuing your art education in a different fashion. So focusing on character design, for example, might have you working largely with characters and forsaking things like landscapes. You might not be doing a lot of painting. You might be doing mostly drawing. You might be avoiding sculpture, which, sculpture is great, but if it doesn't tie in specifically to what you're doing, you can shave off some of those pieces. And when we're talking about art schools in general, especially if you're going to an art college or university, a state school like I did, where you're having to take math and science and history and writing and all these other things, obviously shaving all those off and just focusing on your art, it's more efficient. You're going to make quicker progress. You're going to spend less money. So tailoring your art education for yourself based on taking online courses or watching videos and just honing your craft and your skills is going to allow you to just be so focused and regimented on exactly what you want to work on. And that's another just tremendous benefit of staying out of art school and focusing on your education being exactly what you need. Time and time management are another big set of components of this. Big components that make it beneficial for you to avoid going to that pesky art school. When you're working for yourself, learning to draw and studying, it doesn't matter what time of day you do it. Classes are necessarily set for specific times, but your personal schooling doesn't have to follow the same rules. Many artists are people of the extremes. And so I find in my life, many of them are either people who get up first thing in the morning and work super early before other people are awake, or they do their best work in the middle of the night after everyone else has gone to sleep. These are not the times when classes usually happen if you're at an art school of some kind. And so if you are pursuing this on your own, you have the capacity to work when it best suits your personality, when it best suits your mind, and when it best suits your body. Now, there is something to be said for learning how to operate on the schedules and timeframes that other people set for you. But for some people, being able to work in the dead of night, being able to do their classes for half an hour periods in between jobs or while they're watching kids or whatever it might be, could be the thing that gets them through this, that makes this possible. There's a lot of people that are not ever going to be able to go to art school who dramatically desire to learn the things that art school teaches because of their schedule, because of their time. We don't all have the wonderful blank slate of having just finished high school and we've got all the time in the world. Some people have kids. Some people are older. Some people are transitioning from a career. Some people are still in a career. And so being able to do these things and learn at your own pace at any time frame that works for you is going to be game changing for some people. And this is another reason why art school might not be the right choice for you with what you are personally trying to pursue. All right, let's finally crack into the money, the financial burden, the economic cost. Whilst it is difficult to uncover accurate financial figures for the cost of an art education, some quick research will yield some extraordinary figures. Many of the financial institutes that research and report on such things will give figures in the ranges of $8,000 to $40,000 per year for art colleges and schools across the United States. My personal experience was less than this, but it was almost 15 years ago that I graduated. I believe my degrees together cost close to $60,000 all said and done. So if we assume that prices in education have gone up like everything else certainly has, the figures that the financial institutions are reporting are believable. These financial costs also don't account for living expenses or anything like that. And if you're moving out of town or out of state or across the country, where you are going to not have anyone to live with and you're going to have all these extra burdens financially that you're going to be incurring, these costs could go up tremendously. But let's focus just on like the lower end of that, right? So $8,000 a year. So that would be $32,000 for your art degree. And that's very much on the low end. I know that for our state schools here, that's not attainable. That's not something that you can do anymore. So you're probably looking at about $30,000 as a very, very, very low end. And in some cases, it's going to be closer to $200,000. And these figures are not things that I'm pulling out of my head. Obviously, I'm quoting you from what I did, and I have some friends now that are in school and students that graduated in the last couple of years that are in school that are looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $26,000 a year for their education, which seems like an extraordinary amount of money. So you have to start thinking about, is it worth it? Is that education worth that financial burden? And for some people, it will be. Some people, the finances are not an issue. Your grandparents or your parents have blessed you with a money set aside for such things. Maybe you've managed to get some scholarships, in which case these financial components are just not that big a deal to you. But for most people, the sheer quantity of money required to go to art school in this fashion is going to be prohibitively expensive. And you also have to sit and think, what am I paying for? And you have to evaluate for you personally if the cost justifies what you're getting out of it. Especially having explored earlier that there are so many online resources that are free, and there are wonderful online resources that cost money, but cost a fraction of what we're looking at here. So for example, if you look at all of the people that I mentioned earlier, I haven't done the math on this, so please don't quote me, but I would wager that all three of the first guys that I mentioned, Marc Brunet, Steven Zapata, and Trent Kanuiga, you could probably purchase all of the classes that they offered for under what a year of art school would cost. Now again, I don't know, I haven't done the math yet, but I would wager that it's pretty close. And that's kind of crazy because the content that you're going to get from people like them is going to be very much specifically tailored towards your needs. Because obviously, if you don't want to go into designing for games or movies or something like that, it's not going to be beneficial for you. But even if your goal is to be an oil painter, the reality is going to art school and paying $60,000 to $200,000 for that art degree is that really going to help you be a better oil painter? Is it going to help you have a business as an oil painter? Well, actually we'll get into that part in just a little bit, but the financial burden is one of the biggest things that comes up. And so I don't want to spend a ton of time here belaboring it. It's a crazy amount of money, and you just have to think for you personally, is that worth it? I want to talk about personal accountability next. This might come across a little strange, but bear with me for a moment. If you're going to want to work in the art world, a difficult place to make a living for sure, you are going to have to develop the tools and personal strategies to keep yourself working even when you don't want to, even when it's quite difficult. School does this for you, artificially in a sense, but it doesn't necessarily prepare you for the world after. If you commit to teaching yourself and learning on your own, you will either develop the strategies necessary to do the work, or you will find out that you don't want to or cannot. And if you're going to find out that you don't want to work in the art industry or feel like you can't, wouldn't you rather have that figured out without the years and money spent? It might be a hard truth to wrap your head around, but if you get all the way through art school, you can get through it feeling like you've succeeded because you've gotten really good grades, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you've uncovered what is necessary for working in the industry, whichever part of the industry that you want to work in. Deciding to approach things for yourself, deciding to bite off just the pieces that you can chew, one piece at a time, allows you to ascertain whether this is really for you. And it's a really lovely, beneficial thing. This comes from a place of experience, but also just from the sheer quantity of stories and the math that bears out on how many people finish getting a college degree and then don't actually utilize that degree. I don't know what the modern statistics are, but they used to say that 70% of people who got a college degree never actually used that degree. And at least from my personal experience, that seems to be the case, that a huge quantity of people that get a degree either use it for just a little bit of time or they don't ever use it. And I think some of this just is, if you go to school, if you go to college when you're 18, the you that you think you are and the things that you think you want at 18 are often not what you come out the other end wanting. And you're not the same person by the time you finish school. So doing this on your own, you detach yourself from the financial burdens, but also you can give yourself a little bit more time, maturity, and age to actually work through and figure out, is this really what I want to do? And the beautiful part about all of this is that if you do it, if you figure out how to have this personal accountability, you breed real commitment in yourself. You learn how to do these things. You learn how you work. And all of a sudden, you can trust yourself far more to actually complete the jobs and do them right and do them well. So, doing this on your own instead of going to art school might just be exactly what you need to prove to yourself that this really is the right path for you. Here's another thing that often comes up specifically with technologies. The world is shifting and the schools have yet to catch up. I saw this even when I was in school, particularly with computer programs, and it just happens because the professors and the teachers who are there are often people who were hired and then pulled out of the industry in some capacity years earlier. Now, with very, very high-end art schools, this is often not the case. They are often people who are still working in the industry. But for most art schools, that's not going to be the case. Your professors and teachers are going to be people that worked in whatever the industry was, or were just quite accomplished and had the appropriate degrees at some point. So the information that they're passing on to you is often not actually reflective of the world around you. And with how fast technology is improving and moving right now, especially with artificial intelligence in art, I'm not sure that the schools are going to be able to keep up with the new information coming out. If they couldn't keep up 15 years ago when I was in college, I really seriously doubt that most of them will be keeping up now. Now, there are, of course, principles that are timeless. Value and shading and line work have not changed that much in the last 1,000 years. That's not true. They haven't changed that much in the last 100 years. But they certainly haven't changed that much in the last 10 or 15. So those fundamentals are always going to be beneficial. Your teachers are not going to be tremendously out of date on those things, but they might be very out of date when it comes to things like digital art. A lot of the teachers that I worked with in my graphic design programs never, ever taught us anything in Illustrator or Photoshop. They didn't really use them. We didn't get any instruction in those things. They just kind of said, make a thing, and we would go figure it out and make a thing. But even at that point, they were detached from it. And I would imagine that that has just continued to progress because technology continues to progress. And it's very, very hard if you're teaching full time at the university or at the college to keep up with everything as it's shifting. You got hired for a purpose, and whether there's a lot of ego there or not, you're going to do what you know how to do. And so a lot of times schools are just a little out of touch in those capacities. And another part here is that traditional art schools often don't teach much about business at all. They tend to be stuck in the actual execution of the art, which makes sense, but they often neglect the application of anything other than the skills themselves. So this is really, really prudent if you are going to a state art school, if you're going to get a ceramics degree or a sculpture degree or a painting degree perhaps. But it's going to pertain to really anything artistically. If you're going to go into the art industry, by and large, you are going to be advocating for yourself and you're going to be entrepreneurial in some sense. And so you're going to need those skills. And art programs, even if it's a program that teaches you, basically expecting you to go out and paint for a living, they don't have you take business classes. They don't teach you how to sell art. Now, I'm sure some do, but most that I have been aware of, and certainly the one that I went to, they never taught anything about, okay, now that you have this degree, how do you get a job? How do you, sell your artwork? How do you approach galleries? How do you put a portfolio together? A lot of those things just weren't a part of it. So you can find a lot of that stuff online now that's going to walk you through it. But again, this is just an example of things that are not included in that in that art education that you're paying so much money for if you're going. And a lot of these things are online and they're available. And it's just one more piece of how sometimes the art schools are a little out of touch with what their artists, what their students are actually going to need to apply all these things in real applications. Whew, it feels like so much, and yet I know that I barely touched the tip of the iceberg on this issue. Ugh. So this is the conclusion then of the second podcast about art school in general. And this one was why you shouldn't go to art school. I hope it didn't seem too negative. The goal here was not to just hate on art schools. I obviously went to one. I think they do have specific places and purposes. But I think that it's very important, especially in today's day and age and with all the resources that are available, to try to approach this from several different sides. And I really wish, honestly, from the depths of my heart, I wish I could give you who are listening right now a precise recommendation on what you should do. And I don't want to seem deceptive because I had the first episode of this series that was on why you should go to art school, and this one's on why you shouldn't. But the reality is the decision's complicated, and it's not a binary thing. It's not that every single person should do one or the other. I think what it comes down to is my trepidation and my fear for most people is that they will go to art school because it prolongs it puts you further away from making the decisions about what you want to do with your life. Because we're so built to just go to school and follow this cycle. You know, if you are here in the US and you started school in kindergarten, you were like 5 years old. You went all the way through, you graduated at 18. You've been in school for 13 years. It's daunting to go out into the world and do something other than school. You know what feels good is to continue doing what you've been doing. And so you go to school, you keep going to school. But the problem is at that point, school starts costing money. And maybe you live in a country where an art education isn't going to cost you money. Then I think this entire thing changes. But here in the US, your art school is going to cost you a fortune, and you really need to figure out if it's going to do what you want it to do. And even if it's free, if it's going to take 2 to 4 years of your time, is it going to teach you what you want to know and what you need to know for your career of choice? And I hate to say it, but if you're really young, you might not even really know what your career of choice is yet. It certainly takes most people a couple years of college to really start to isolate what they want to do. Very few people go into school and know exactly what they're going to do and then come out the other side and do that thing happily for a long period of time. So art school has its benefits, but it's not right for everyone. And there are certainly other options. And the nice, icing on the cake and the cherry on top is how wonderful is it that we have so many options now. You want what's always been done? You want to go to a traditional art school? Fantastic. It's available for you. It costs a lot of money, but if that's really what you have your heart set on, it exists. And if you really want to go into the art industry in any capacity, you want to be a painter, you want to be a sculptor, you want to draw concept art, you want to work in film, all of that exists in traditional school form, and it exists in the online realm. We are so fortunate that this is the world that we live in. And in some senses, the last couple years with the pandemic have made this even more accessible online. So we're in this beautiful, terrible place where we have a absolute glut of material available and so many decisions that we can make about these things. So my final advice on this for you, human, who are deciding whether you are going to go to art school or not, is think about what you want. Think about what you want to do and what you want to get out of an art education. And then try to sit down and figure out which makes sense for you more. Does it make sense to go to the art school to spend the money, to build the community, and to do all of those things? Or if you have a very particular set of skills and you happen to be a particularly disciplined person, how can you get that material most efficiently and for the least cost? And that's probably going to be online, taking courses with people like the people I mentioned earlier, or many, 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 many others. So, thank you for tuning in. If you are still with me at this point in the video, I applaud you and I appreciate you. This podcast and video is a little bit more specific than some of the last ones have been. So I am hoping that for you who are still listening at this point, it's been beneficial for you to just hear from someone else's perspective and from years of experience in the art education field, what this might look like, what this might feel like. So again, if you enjoyed the video, I would very much encourage you to consider subscribing and liking the video. If you want to leave me some comments, I'd love to hear what you're looking for specifically, what kind of art education you want specifically. It might be good to start a discussion down there in the comments about it, or, I might even be able to get back to you and give you some of my recommendations. They're not obviously going to be perfect recommendations, but usually if you have a couple more humans coming together to think about something, we can get a little bit further than we can on our own. With that being said, thank you so much for listening. Have a good one, y'all. See you soon.